Hi there and welcome back to the studio today. We've got a lot of stuff to do today, so let's just go ahead and get started with it. So what we have here on the palette is titanium white, flake white, burnt umber, alizarin permanent, cadmium red medium, yellow ochre, sap green, ultramarine blue, ivory black, and our painting medium today is Liquin original. And if you're new to this channel and you're wondering exactly what materials I'm using, you can always go ahead and scroll down to the description box below and I'll have all of that information typed up for you. So today we are going to be addressing the globe. So we're actually going to utilize, wait for it, what do you think this is that I'm holding? What? Yeah, we're going to be using magnets to help us draw the circle for the globe. Now, I'm not going to lie, this is going to be a very unconventional way to draw a circle. So what I'm going to use are what are known as neodymium magnets. They're rare earth magnets, but they're not really that rare. You can find them online pretty much almost anywhere. So I'm going to type that up right there. So neodymium magnets. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correct. I'm doing my best to pronounce it. So you're going to need neodymium magnets. And you're going to need your T-square. This is a glass, not glass, but plexiglass T-square. I think it's plexiglass, don't quote me on that. It's just a clear glass T-square. And you want your T-square to be plastic. You don't want the T-square to be magnetic at all. So let's go ahead and figure out where we want the radius of this circle to be. So you know the basic circle, right? You have the center point, you have the radius, you have the circumference, but it doesn't get more complicated than that. So we're going to take, so these are about 5 little neodymium magnets. They're pretty strong. Definitely will pinch your finger there. Extremely strong magnets. So if you don't have very, very strong magnets, this probably won't be the best way to approach it. So I'm going to go to the back side. And yeah, this might be kind of risky for the painting. So you want to make sure that your painting is completely dry. And so what you're going to want to do is, once you've chosen the center of where you want the circle to be, so I have 2 of the magnets on the back side, 2 of the magnets on the front, and I'm trying to be very careful not to poke a hole through the canvas. So once you have an idea of where you want the center to be, just take 1 extra magnet, attach it on, and put the T-square exactly where you think you want it to be, and check that out. Now we're going to have an arc. So let's return back to the palette. So with just a little bit of our Liquin original, just to thin out the paint a little bit, we're going to use, let's say something dark. So burnt umber, ivory black, alizarin permanent, back to ivory black, alizarin permanent, ultramarine blue. Yeah, we want something fairly dark. We're going to thin out the paint a little bit with our Liquin original. Let's just put a little bit more burnt umber just to add some more paint. And the Liquin original. Now what we're going to want to do here is hold on to the point where we want to start making the circle. And we're going to want to fix the brush right to where we want it and just start going around. Couldn't be any more simple until that happens. So let's go ahead and go back, push down, make sure we're still on the right path. This is why I said you need a lot of paint. So I'm going to go ahead, get a little more paint. My palette is on the table right now. Trying not to reinvent the wheel here, but doing a little bit of that. That's going to be a pretty good circle. Now then, there's no such thing as a perfect circle in nature. I think the only perfect circles you'll find are in mathematics. If you think about a perfect circle, think about a planet. It's always going to have little hills and valleys. It's never going to be quite perfect. But this is a way to get it more perfect, at least more round than I possibly could freehand draw. I'm the wrong person to ask how to freehand draw a circle. I think most of us will probably not really want to spend a lot of time saying, oh, well, I can draw a circle freehand. Okay, so now I'm just going to take off the T-square. And that is pretty darn close to a perfect circle, if you would ask me. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract this portion because this is where the T-square kind of slipped up. So it's this little outer circle. So now we have the circle for the globe. That we're gonna address that stuff later. But the important thing now is that we have a perfect, close to perfect circle. At least much closer than we can get freehand drawing one. Now here we have the camera right front and center, or at least as close to front and center as I can potentially get it. This is going to be the perfect circle that you're going to see with the least amount of distortion. So I am going to have to move the camera a little bit to the corner just so I don't cover too much of the footage, but this is it. This is going to be the perfect circle that we have. Now the next thing we're going to want to do is with a different brush, we're going to mix up that background color once again. So we're going to use a little bit of ivory black, alizarin permanent, titanium white. It's kind of a purple, but not entirely purple. So that's why I'm using the ivory black. If I wanted a straight purple, I would just use ultramarine blue, alizarin permanent, and maybe the titanium white, and that would be about it. But now let's go ahead and get into some of the cadmium red medium just to warm it up a little bit. And I don't really think I'm going to get the color just right. Color matching is pretty darn difficult to do, even if you've already painted that color before. But we'll probably go back into that background color later. So next week, so on Tuesday, is the last sitting that I have with Steve from Life. So again, this was a 6-week pose. So that's why I'm saying we have a lot to do, because after that, I'm going to want to be done with this painting and move on to another larger project. But I've also got a lot of ideas in terms of other videos to do, because let's face it, we don't want to work on the same exact thing every single day. At least I don't. That's why I travel to other art groups and stuff, just to get some practice. Now I do want to be painting every single day, or at least try to be painting every single day. But like I mentioned, I do want to make room for some other painting exercises, such as that Rembrandt that I was working on. But I didn't really like the photo reference that much. I need to look for a better photo reference of that Rembrandt. So I'm just going to go ahead and adjust the corner of the back of the globe here. See how easy it is to move this stuff around? Don't gotta stress out about it. And the color is pretty close. We got a pretty close color to that background. But we'll still go back in later. And by later, I mean maybe tomorrow or the day after that to cover the rest of that. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to want to do is, let's mix up a color for this now. Now with a different brush, I'm going to go ahead and mix up a color. I guess just ivory black, titanium white, a little bit of alizarin permanent, ultramarine blue. I want it to be kind of a bluish gray, but I don't want it to be a generic gray. So something about this should work. Something about like this. So that ought to work very nicely. I want to make sure to follow the lines. This is one of the only times that I'll really suggest to paint within the lines. But hey, if we mess up that little sphere, it's alright, we'll come back to it. We can always correct that sphere. It didn't really take long using those magnets and the T-square. to draw that circle. Now, if this was an ellipse, that would be a different kind of problem. So I'm thankful that it's just a circle. So this is going to go out. So yeah, I did change this kind of, I changed this a lot when you look at the photo reference, because this is now coming out. So this is pushing forward out of the binoculars. See this corner here? In the photo reference, this is actually inwards. But that's all right. I mean, I like that this is actually obviously right in front of the globe. That is, I like that the binoculars is obviously right in front of the globe, as opposed to, who knows, maybe it's a little bit there, a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. Instead, I know exactly that this thing is right in front of the globe. But anyway, let's go ahead and add a little bit more ivory black to this mixture. So just a little more ivory black, and I guess we'll put a little more of the ultramarine blue. Trying to follow those outlines very, very closely. I'm going to soften this a little bit. Just want to soften that edge. And the way I'm softening the edge is just dragging the brush around the edge. Just to soften a little bit. Let's go ahead, add in a little darker shape over here, so it barely shows up. A lot of subtlety in this area now, meaning the values are very, very close to one another, yet differentiated. Now very quickly, with the same brush, I'm just throwing a little bit of titanium white on it. Putting in those little highlights, a little more titanium white. And very much like in Alla Prima, I'm just going to let the brush drag over here, but really trying to keep it soft, because my hand can slip up at any moment. And you know what I'm going to say, or you might not. I don't really say this too often. But anyway, when in doubt, blur it out. So I don't want to draw too much attention to these little reflections here. Just a little bit of attention. And just a little more titanium white. Just for good measure. And now we're really going to want to push the three-dimensionality of that globe. So we're going to use 3 brushes: shadow, middle tones, and light. So I'm going to start off with the ivory black, flake white. So just ivory black, flake white. So I'm going to create a little value scale for the globe, because it's going to take quite a few little passes of color to get it to look really, really round. So here's my approach. This is going to be my approach for that globe. And this could also help you if you're painting other still life objects like apples and, I don't know, glass with little details on it or something, and you're wondering, how on earth am I going to get to all those details? So what you're going to want to do is make the thing look really, really realistic without the without any of the details, just like we did with the book. But the book was a little more simple because the book was just planes, just simple flat planes. Now we're dealing with a sphere. Not as complicated. It's not as complicated as a, just gonna throw a little more sap green into this part. It's not going to be as complicated as the portrait was, or the hands are, but it is going to require a little more of a value family. So in the middle tone region, I'm pushing it a little more greenish. I perceive it to be a little more greenish. And I'm going to get the light brush now. A little bit of Liquin. So we're going to make it really, really light, but we're not going to blast it. We're not going to make it as light as the photo reference makes it appear to be. So it's going to be kind of a greenish blue, but I guess from life, I suppose it's going to appear warmer. So I'm tinting it with a little bit of the green. I suspect that that photo reference is blasting it and making the blues look a little bit too generically blue. I think there's going to be a tad bit more warmer colors. And I know that I said light, middle, and light brush, middle tone brush, and shadow, but each area is going to be subdivided. So the light brush might have, I don't know, like 3 or 4 different values associated to it. The middle tone brush might have like another 3 or 4. Same goes with the shadow. A little bit lighter there. That might be too light, so I think I'm going to bring it down. Maybe a little bit of yellow ochre. Let's throw in some yellow ochre in there. This is very much a sky blue, which then takes me to question of the day. What colors would you use to mix a sky blue? Always been curious about that. I know that there's a little bit of warmth in the sky, and landscape painting is something I do actually want to get into and make some videos about it. Not necessarily tutorial type videos, since I'm not that skilled with landscape, but more just like having fun painting landscapes kind of thing. So that is question of the day. What colors do you use to mix up a sky blue? I used titanium white, ultramarine blue, tiny bit of sap green, and the tiniest, even tiniest bit of the yellow ochre. So that would be my sky blue. So let's just go ahead and add a little more into this area, and we're going to start with the middle tone brush. And I did just raise the light sensitivity on my camera because it's kind of hard to get light this far into the corner of my studio. So we're going to start off with this kind of greenish question. So the question, one of the questions that I looked at, I don't know if I was able to get to it in the Q&A video. Again, I tried to get to as many questions as I could handle. One of the questions was, why do I do this? So why do I kind of go in this fashion as opposed to, as you would expect, with a painter? I don't know. I think that it's just because it's just the way that I move the brush. It's just my own personality. Like I always say, you can learn the you can learn all of the technique involved in creating paintings. You could train 1,000 different people, the art of classical painting, the art of realist painting, and believe it or not, well, you already know what I'm going to say, right? They're all going to paint very, very differently. They're going to paint very similar in terms of their drawing. They're going to draw very similar in terms of proportion and value and all that stuff. But the way that they apply the paint and the way that they simplify and choose to edit certain things, that's really going to be where you're going to see a lot of differences among the artists. So I gotta be careful not to make that too light, but I do think it needs a little more light. And I'm going to tint it with a little more of the yellow ochre. Shoot, we'll just go right into this little shape here. Why not? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go over this several times with these brushes until it's super, super realistic. And that's what we're going to want to do today. And believe it or not, that can take a long time. You know, someone tells you, oh, it's just a circle, it's just a sphere, paint the sphere. It really, it can take a while to make it look very, very realistic. It doesn't take so much to make it kind of look real, but we want this thing to come at us. We want this thing to really, really have the sense of volume. And this is how we're going to do it, back and forth between the light brush and the middle brush. Not terribly worried about the any of the little details, because we'll kind of almost glaze the all the little surface details. So yes, the halftone brush even goes all the way up here. Want it to be very, very smooth. You know, there are so many instances in my portrait group. You know, the Tuesday morning group that I'm filming at now. I think you got that video yesterday, just because I had to miss a couple days this week. But like, so many funny things happen in that group that I really wish I could get on film. Like the globe. My friend Cheryl brings the globe in, and then my buddy Marshall's like, she's got the whole world in her hands. She's got the whole world. See, I don't have a future in music, definitely not. But you get my point, right? It's kind of hilarious, and I wish I could get that on film. Maybe I can ask them to do a little skit for me. And I really love those moments, to be honest. Painting is not just about creating a painting. Painting's really about the experience. And what joy it is to experience creating paintings with other people. So let's go ahead and add the dark color now. So let's go into here. I want to push that dark a little bit darker. So you know what? I can also use this as a time now to talk about form. Wouldn't that be nice? So right now we have painted in the middle tones. The lights. I guess this is going to be basics of form kind of thing for you. Most of you know what I'm talking about. Middle tones, lights, highlight. Now again, the highlight isn't going to be as blasted in real life as it is in the photograph, depending on how glossy this globe is, but I don't know, I think that the highlight's going to be somewhat about like this. I've heard other people refer to this as a specular reflection instead of highlight, but you know, I just like to call it highlight. And this is going to be the area in the form that is most perpendicular to the light source. And as the planes start to turn away from the light, right there, that's going to be the area that is perpendicular to the light source. So right when you're perpendicular to the light source, you're not going to be in light anymore. You're going to be in shadow. But the shadow here is going to be much more elaborate than the shadows you usually see me paint. I usually don't emphasize any information in the shadows. Well, that's going to change with the globe. And I'm kind of like scrubbing the brush a little bit here just to soften the edge. I may have just answered that question. Why do I paint like that? Maybe it's just to soften edges. That could be it. But anyway, so once you have the shadow figured out, like suppose we have it like this. Now suppose that is the shadow. Next, you're really going to want to emphasize the dark light. So this is going to be the dark light. A little bit darker. The dark light, as you hear me refer to a lot in the portrait painting videos, the dark light is really, as my teacher, my favorite teacher, not my favorite, one of my most favorite teachers that I've had, they're all my favorite, come on. So one of my most favorite teachers, John DeMartin, would tell me the dark light is the most emphatic dark light, which means it's just the most striking dark light. It's the most striking halftone, and it's the one just as light turns into shadow. And the little outline there for the shadow is referred to as the terminator line. Some people also refer to it as the bed bug line, but I don't really like to use that term. It's just not my style. So now that we have that, the next thing to talk about is going to be something I never talk about, just because I never get to it, but we're going to get to it here. Reflected lights. So reflected light is going to be very, very tricky because we're going to want to keep the value the same, but we're going to change the hue a little bit. So hopefully you can see this without me falling into my painting. So we're going to add a little bit of Alizarin permanent, and we're going to try just this out for now. Notice how that value is still pretty dark. Might be too dark. It's too dark. So I'm going to raise the value up a little bit, still keeping that warmth, still trying to keep the warmth. So now it's going to get tricky because we want to have the same value, but we're going to change the hue. And we're just introducing Alizarin permanent into the equation here. See how we're now starting to tint that a little bit warmer, and we're keeping the value range very, very similar. So nothing in the shadow should be as light, so nothing in this area should be as light as anything in this area. If I were to accidentally make a value in the shadow here as light as one of the values in the light, that's like me telling you, oh, there's a plane here that's like starting to fold over top, which is possible if there was a form here, like a little, I don't know, like a huge mountain in here that's just like just screaming out of the globe. But we don't have any of that. So now I'm going to push it even warmer. So a little bit of cadmium red medium down here. And this is going to really, really hopefully get the illusion of the form now, because you're getting the reflection of the table bouncing onto the bottom of the globe. And now the fact that I just threw in cadmium red on its own is very deceptive, because I'm not painting very opaque. If you notice, I'm letting the colors mix with one another as I'm applying the paint onto the canvas. So I'm kind of mixing on the canvas at the same time. This allows me to not have too strong of a red. So I want to compare this red to the tablecloth, because I think the tendency is going to be to make the reflected light the same color as the light that is causing that reflection, but it's not. It's going to be a little bit different. So that's just going to be one little passage of it. There's going to be so much more involved in it. So like around here, there's actually going to be another reflection coming from this area here. And here's where I think I really might need a purple color on its own. So let's get a different brush, just so I don't have to clean that one. So let's go ahead and mix up a purple. And one thing that I've been doing very recently is I have a lot of brushes out, and I designate certain brushes to be warm or light. So light brushes, warm brushes, and then I keep them that way so I don't muddy them up too much. But if I accidentally confuse a warm with a cool, then that will be the case where I would break out the brush cleaner and clean that off. So see, that's just too purple. So something like this, and I'm going to let the paint mix right onto the canvas, so right around here. So I don't want to change the value that much, but if I do, I would prefer it to get darker than lighter. So now each corner of this globe, each corner of the globe, I don't have it yet, but each corner here, as we look here and here, it's impossible to see in the photo reference, but all around here now there's going to be very, very subtle changes in the value. So I always, not always, but oftentimes you hear me refer to the speed of the curve, the rate of the curvature. Well, in a circle, the speed of the curves is constant. So I used to, so before I was, let's just say I was a math tutor, okay, in my past, and the way you would think about curvature in mathematics is actually very similar to the way I think about curvature in the painting. But don't worry, I'm not going to talk about math. So I'm going to push this area here a little bit lighter. Pushing this lighter makes that darker. And I always want to be standing back. Always want to be standing back to compare the values to one another from a distance. Halftone brush. When I was a math student, I really, in particular, enjoyed Calculus 3. So Calculus 3 is basically taking the study of shapes, just like shapes in space. So just don't think about the word math. Just like if you're afraid of, not afraid, but if you just don't like the word math, like most people I meet, forget about the word math. So just think Calculus 3. That might scare some people too. So anyway, it's all about the study of curves and writing out a bunch of relationships to relate certain curves to one another. And so I'm kind of thinking about that really because I'm thinking about each little area on the globe and painting each little area of the globe its designated value. And its value, so suppose this value here, using the halftone brush. So this value is getting darker because of that designated angle that we have with respect to that light source. And the more planes we put in there, the more volume we're going to get into the globe. We want a lot of volume into this globe. We're really going to start to push the still life. And I do want to get into some more still life paintings as well. Just dedicated still life paintings, like without any figures in it. So just getting darker and darker as we approach the corner of the globe. You know, you can almost think about it as, you can almost think about time zones. So since this is a globe that we're painting, each little area on the globe is going to have a designated time zone. And if you really want to know, if you want to conceptualize the idea of breaking or subdividing forms into planes, you can almost think about your time zone. So say you're in this part of the world, right? So this part of the world is in full light. So basically you're kind of in the middle of the day. I'm not gonna, don't quote me on that, but this part of the world is in daylight. This part of the world is in, I don't know, evening or dusk or whatever. This part of the world is in nighttime. And then as you go all the way around the circle again, you're going to approach morning all the way on the back side of this, and then again you're going to make it to the middle of the day, and the cycle goes on. And that's just because of the plane, that super large plane that we're all resting on, that super large plane on the sphere that we're floating in space called the Earth. I should start writing this stuff down. And I think that's about all I'm going to want to do for the globe today. So we really tried our best to figure out the circumference of this perfect circle using that little tool that we created. And then after that, going into all of these little subtle tones. So going into the light, shadow, the dark light. Remember, this dark light right here is the value just as light turns into shadow. So this is the part where light terminates into, so here's the light, and this is the point where it terminates into the shadow, and the shadow as well has a reflected light here, a reflected light there, and then even the halftones get slightly darker over here, slightly darker over here as the forms turn away from the light. And then of course we have the highlight here. But again, this isn't really that perfectly rendered out. You can see still some of the light marks here and here. And that is because this globe is kind of reflective. So I did leave some little marks to suggest kind of some reflections in the globe. And that being said, I really hope that today's video helps you out. I wish you the best in all of your artwork. And as always, you know what I'm going to say, right? I really want to bring the experience of being here in the studio, creating these paintings for you every single day. But not only that, I also want to travel to other artists' studios, collaborate with other artists, work in their studios, maybe even film some little traveling videos. I'm really trying to bring the experience of painting to you. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and I'll be back again very soon. And here's an image of the painting after today's sitting with the camera as close to front and center as I can possibly get it. Now, bear in mind that of course there's going to be a glare here, and somehow that glare just keeps growing. But in any case, we can really see right around here now that the form is really starting to read, that this area really is starting to emerge out of the light. It could be just because this is like the only area that's not affected by that glare. But in any case, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll be back again very soon.